What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. As always, this video is brought to you by NutriBio Supplements, Crystals Bikinis, and Bio Longevity Labs. If you guys are watching this during I guess it's Labor Day weekend, Bio Longevity Labs is having a huge sale, site-wide sale. JP15 as a code gets you 40% off the most reliable peptides in the US. So, um, something a little bit different. I normally do like personal or solo Q&As, kind of the same idea, but I like the underrated, overrated format. So that's mostly how I'm going to do this. I asked for topics so I could decide underrated or overrated. A lot of people still just wrote in straight up questions. So I may toggle back and forth a little bit between the two styles. Um, First one, underrated or overrated, using mock peaks during a contest prep. Firstly, I will say that I think that this is overrated. And I think I see this from a lot of inexperienced coaches or coaches that are trying to portray themselves to be more knowledgeable or experienced than they really are. I think a lot of times this ends up being a way to keep a client entertained or make them feel like you're really doing something. And I also feel like, for the most part, the people that I see most frequently deploying these like mock peaks or trial peaks, they are people that I don't consider to have a really good foundation coaching wise. Frankly, I think it's guys that don't know what they're doing when it comes to putting people on stage. Um, like I've, not to make it sound like I'm Hani Rambod, but I've helped so many people get to stage. I've competed so many times myself, and I've seen your physique probably all through the off season, all through the prep. I know how to peak your physique. I don't need 4 or 5 or 6 chances to guess at it before we get to the show. Um, I think, one scenario where it can help or it can be an exercise that you do is if you're 4 or 5 weeks out and you have somebody pretty much ready, and then every weekend you just try to recreate the same schedule and process. Um, but again, I don't really like, because then so what? You're every week you're like redepleting the person, and then every weekend you're filling them back up. I am more so just going to check in with that person more frequently and do what is required to toggle the physique and manage fatigue in the moment instead of this like predetermined mock peak. And if that's the case, if you have somebody ready early, like, man, it should just be a slow, steady load to bringing that person to their best. Once you have that look, you can manage it up and down as you like. So I'm not a huge fan. That's something I really do. I think the good coaches or a sound process is using timely high days of just more bodybuilding food and more foods that that person's body could expect leading into a show. And then you're collecting, data, so to speak. Like you're finding out how long does it take for this person to dry back off after a high day. What foods sit best with this person? What foods give this person the best look? Um, does reintroducing fats or red meats distend this person's stomach or cause a lack of abdominal control? All these different things like should be taken into account, but I wouldn't consider, I'm not going through like a full on peak. I'm not manipulating water, sodium. I'm not bringing in the different ancillary supplements that I would the final week before a show. So it's not by any means a trial peak. It's just, I'm going to refeed the physique and refill it as needed. Um, and then take the data and extract it and use it when the time comes, because I know what I'm doing. Fat loading during peak week, underrated or overrated? I'm a little bit split on this one. I think when done correctly, it can be underrated. I think it's easier to mess up. So in general, I'm going to say overrated. Cheat meals in prep or off season. Honestly, I think they are probably overrated and over glorified just in general in the bodybuilding community. Um, there's so many different terms: free meal, cheat meal, off plan meal, all these different things. Every single person, every individual is going to be served best by something different. Once a week, some people need to go off and not track anything and have a burger and fries and a piece of cake. There are just people that just need that for the sustainability of their adherence. Um, some people don't like to do one at all and feel like it just doesn't make sense for what they're trying to achieve. I've had different stretches of time in my own bodybuilding where it just didn't fit my goals at the time to go off and have big untracked meals. And then there's times where I've gone out once a weekend and I have a nice dinner with my lady, and I don't think anything of it. So I think it just depends. And really, I'm discussing that in an off-season setting. It's not something that I do frequently in contest prep. I would just rather see someone eat a ton of bodybuilding food. And that way, like I talked about earlier, I can gauge the response and use that information later when it matters. Every now and again, I do different things. I may do a higher day of food and I'll tell someone, replace your post workout meal with cereal and whey. Or I may do different things where I add a muffin pre training or add a muffin before bed. But most of the time, I'm not telling people in contest prep with serious competitive goals to just go off and eat whatever they want. I just don't think that that's productive. And I think that if, from a psychological standpoint, if that is what someone needs while in a contest prep with serious competitive goals, I think there's a lot that happened for the time leading up to that was not handled properly, either by the coach, by the client, or by both. Like that person is just not in a good frame of mind to be going through contest prep. There are some coaches, there are some athletes that they do a standard cheat meal once a week in contest prep, no matter what. And to be honest with you, when I say that out loud and I think of the examples that I know of, it doesn't usually end up well. There's a coach that I know of that just consistently does that. And you check in once a week during prep, no matter what, doesn't matter. It's never going to be more frequent. You check in Saturday morning and then Saturday night, you get to go have a cheat meal and have whatever you want. That, I'm not going to say names, but that coach that I'm thinking of, way more often than not, puts guys on stage that are not ready to get on stage. And then there are times recently where we've seen genetically gifted professionals talk about doing weekly cheat meals in a contest prep and then show up and get waxed. So again, time and a place, but for the most part, I think cheat meals overrated, especially in contest prep. High protein intake in the off season to grow, upwards of 2 to 3 grams per kg. So I guess he's talking about upwards of like 1.5 grams per pound. So an example would be like, 100 kg bodybuilder, um, 220 pounds, eating, 300 plus grams of protein. I love this. I would say, I guess, then underrated because I love it. I think protein. I was just discussing this with my buddy Scott. Actually, we talked about how I'm doing high protein, and it seems like my coach Justin Compton prefers that as a philosophy, and I do too. It's just something to me like I can talk through the different reasonings. One of them is like, man, I would rather have too much than not enough. Like if I'm going to swing and miss with anything, I would rather swing and miss with my protein being too high, because I never want to be shortchanging that. I think from like a real life bro science anecdotal perspective, we have consistently heard and seen the most standout muscular physiques come as a result of very, very high protein, like way higher than this guy's even talking about 500 grams a day. Um, and then if you want to talk science, there have been studies that show that when a calorie surplus is driven by the three different macros, three different examples where someone eats in a surplus that is driven by an abundance of fat, an abundance of carbs, or an abundance of protein, energy expenditure and overall body composition are best with the group that overate protein. I think because of the thermic effect of food and being that it is the raw material to build muscle, you can't go wrong eating high protein. The only caveat would be your digestion. So, like anything else in bodybuilding, whether we're talking growth hormone, whether we're talking anabolics, whether we're talking training volume, whether we're talking training frequency, or whether we're talking about protein intake, I think the correct broad answer would be as much as you can handle. Carb cycling in the off season, I think this is probably underrated. I think this is a good approach. I don't know how underrated it is, but I'm saying I agree with the approach. I think um, from what I have seen, most good coaches are putting their clients through some type of carb or calorie cycling all year. And as a general rule, it's pretty dependent on the person's activity or output. So a lot of times it can be as simple as a training day and a rest day. That is a form of carb cycling. That's what I stick with for most of my clients. Then there are some people that are, advanced, or they have more control of their own personal schedule, or maybe this person's just like super meticulous. And I feel like for their own psychology, they do better on a more customized, detailed program. And they might do high, medium, and low days, where that high day is maybe one specific body part or one specific training day, or a couple days a week if you're really trying to put a lot of size on them or maintain a couple body parts, or you train legs twice a week, so that diet is higher. But I think in general, especially when you're pushing food, presumably pushing GH, body weight's coming up in an effort to maintain composition, doing your best to maintain insulin sensitivity. I think lower food, especially on rest days and especially via carbs, just makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Fasted cardio for dieting. So I will say, in the general terms of someone wanting to get leaner for a wedding, for the beach, for a vacation, um, the idea that you have to do your cardio fasted when you have pretty basic goals, I would say overrated. If you are that person and this is not a huge priority or huge part of your life, do your cardio when you can. Especially if you're natural, I don't think it makes any difference. There's some argument to be said, actually, if you're natural, fasted cardio might be detrimental. I think if we're talking about getting ready for a contest as an enhanced bodybuilder, fasted cardio is a must. I'll I won't waste my time arguing with anyone until I'm blue in the face. I just don't care to argue, but time and time again, I've seen it on myself clients, it's a must. It absolutely, especially for my athletes that are getting ready for contests, enhanced athletes that are getting ready for contests, you will see I put in their plan, must be done fasted. This is part of what it means to get on a bodybuilding stage. Like every half a percentage difference that you can garner in your habits or within your control, it needs to be taken. Otherwise, someone is going to take advantage of that half a percent or that 1% difference, and they're going to be the one in the middle with their hand raised, and then you're going to be off to the side when it comes time to get on stage and get awards. So lifestyle, basic result seekers, overrated. Do it whenever. If you're getting on stage, especially as an enhanced bodybuilder that's utilizing some of these different fat loss peptides, beta 2 agonists, clenbuterol, ephedrine, yohimbine, caffeine, even thyroid medications you're taking usually on an empty stomach in the morning or overnight. Absolutely, fasted cardio makes a difference. Okay, so this guy wrote in and just asked a question and said, do you still die on the hill of whole food over protein? Meaning like whole food over protein powder. Yes, absolutely. Again, I think the general idea should be, if you are trying to put on as much muscle mass as possible in as good of a composition as you can, the idea should really be to eat as much whole food, and it really breaks down even simpler to eat as much meat and rice as you can handle. I think for me personally, there was a period in my kind of intermediate part of my bodybuilding journey, especially working for a supplement company and having like a supplement allowance where I was given free products. I definitely over relied on whey protein. And I've made the remark that I think it probably held me back a little bit in terms of gaining muscle. The past handful of years when I've made my best progress, I've predominantly eaten whole food. Now, this person probably asked because as part of my diet right now, I eat 7 meals. 4 of them are whole food based for protein sources, and 3 of them are whey protein. And there's a few reasons for that. One, I have a supplement sponsor, so it helps me from a budget perspective to make up meals then that aren't hurting my budget. Secondly, eating 7 meals, and often, other than when I'm dieting for a contest, I eat lots of food, lots of bodybuilding food. So very, very commonplace and damn near standard the past 2+ years that my daily calories, whether I'm resting or not, are 5,000 or more. And I've reached a certain point being in my 30s and doing this for almost 15 years at this point. I have found my limit digestively to be somewhere between 800 and 1,000 or 1,100 grams of cooked meat in a day before my digestion starts to get worse. So where does that land me? So for right now, I do 4 meals of a whole food protein source between 200 and 225 grams per meal. And so for the day, that lands me between 800 and 900 grams. And then the other meals I make up with whey protein. So in general, I would say that half of your protein, I'll say this better. I think if you are doing half of your meals or half of your total protein from the day comes from whey protein, it's too much. Now, schedule, digestively, all these things, you may have your own individual circumstance. But as a general rule, I would say maybe a third or a fourth of your total protein for the day can be whey protein, and it wouldn't be detrimental, and it might even be easier on you. But in general, absolutely. I think whole food is king. I think meat and rice as a blanket, simple statement. You can't go wrong with meat and rice. A bunch of people wrote in and wanted to know what I think about intensity techniques or intensifiers. Um, so, as a big picture statement, I think that they are probably overrated. I think they are probably overused. I think that has become such a common sentiment and they've been blackballed, so to speak, so much. I see this on TikTok that they're vaulted, whatever the fuck that means. But they've almost reached a point that I think for the demographic of like intermediate to advanced enhanced bodybuilders, they're probably underrated. This is something that I've talked about where I've personally revisited this because I probably went 5 years without doing a single intensity technique. And I just did straight sets. And if I felt like a body part needed more work or I could handle more volume on something, I would just wait. I would rest 2 minutes and do another set. And recently I've come back to predominantly using like drop sets or cluster sets and mostly targeted towards my smaller muscle groups and smaller isolation movements. So arms, side delts, where I'm locked into a seated side lateral machine. I've really enjoyed doing big drop sets, like, you know, quadruple drop sets, where you start with your top weight, top set, get as many as you can, and then you drop it 4 or 5 times. And each time you just go until you physically cannot move. Um, I think it can be a good tool. My friend Austin Brown has made this observation, and I agree with him. It can be a good tool to teach people failure because eventually, at some point, like during a big drop set or a rest pause set, you're gonna reach failure, even if it's by accident. So I agree with that point. Um, Man, and at the end of the day, I've come back to realizing this too. You have to have fun and enjoy what you're doing training wise. Now, there's a fine line with that, especially if you have serious or competitive goals and you're talking about building like a balanced, completely developed physique for the stage. There's going to be a line between having fun and doing what you want versus doing what is required to make those adequate progressions. And that's kind of a line that I've kind of tried to tiptoe. And recently I've gone back to more of I am having fun in the gym within the parameters that the programming makes sense for what my goals are. So kind of a wishy-washy answer there. But in general, I think there's a time and a place for everything. I love a handful of different intensity techniques. Like I've talked about, I've recently enjoyed big drop sets quite a bit. I was always a big fan of the Dante Trudel style rest pause, which is basically one big set, but it's three micro attempts within one set. So, for example, I used to do this a lot on a leg press where I would load it up with a weight that I could get for a very difficult spotter assisted, say 15 reps with the first one. I'd have my timer on my phone ready to go, and I would do anywhere between 20 and 30 seconds with it racked. And then I would unrack it and go again. And maybe you only get 7 or 8. And the last one, like you need a spotter. You rack it, wait 20 or 30 seconds again, and then you go again. And you might only get 5. And that fifth one might be that the spotter is giving you everything that they got to get that thing up. I think for machines, especially when you're locked into something, and for body parts, say that you struggle to feel or they're a priority to bring up, I think that's a really efficient and no BS way of forcing that body part or that muscle to improve. Recovery stuff like massage, cold plunge, red light, cupping, etc. I would say as a big ticket item, like as one observation, I would say all of that stuff in general falls in the overrated category. I think an early and consistent sleep routine is the best recovery tool that you can have. I think doing a good job of managing the stress that you have in your personal life is a great recovery tool. I think doing what you may need to do in terms of like prehab, pre-training, mobility work to stay healthy, I think those are great recovery tools that should be prioritized ahead of stuff like this. I will say I've changed my mind a bit on certain things. As a common theme, I'm constantly changing my mind when presented with different experiences or evidence, whatever you want to call it. I think I've previously said that I think that massage is a complete waste. I don't totally agree now. I think when you have someone that has a background in bodybuilding and working on bodybuilders, and you develop a relationship with them where you discuss and they identify your insufficiencies with movement, um, that can be a really good tool. I don't think it needs to be nearly as frequent as people say. I don't think it needs to be, and I've done it. I've gone to one person and had a weekly massage, like when I'm in prep or whatever the case is. I think that's an unnecessary expense. I think depending on how good your body feels, anywhere from like bi-weekly to once a month for a massage is generally a good thing, especially like you're growing, you're putting on body weight, your leverage has changed. Um, you're taking a beating in terms of progressive training to put on new muscle. So I would say massage is probably still a little overrated if you're someone that feels like you better be doing tissue work once a week. Like, I don't think that's the correct end of the spectrum, but I think it probably lands somewhere in the middle. I will say for underrated, I think foam rolling and the massage gun as very low cost things that you could do for yourself on a daily basis, underrated. I think both of those are excellent. Red light kind of falls into a different one. I almost feel like from all the research and listening and learning that I've done about mitochondrial function, we may revisit red light therapy, like legitimate red light therapy, and feel like that's almost underrated down the line. But that should be part of a bigger picture recovery schedule. I think sunlight is the one of the most underrated aspects of recovery, and that plays into the red light. Um, and I actually think sauna, that wasn't listed, but I think sauna could be considered underrated. I see massive just longevity and wellness benefits from sauna. Cold plunge, I'm not super sold on. And I think cupping is an outright way. Like going back, talking about massage, I'm talking about hand to tissue massage work. When they want to start doing acupuncture, cupping, especially when they want to start doing Graston and you leave, and I've seen people that have bruises and crazy marks all over them, or, your back is covered in cupping marks. This is someone that is scamming you. This is a marketing ploy. And especially with like the Graston, when you get covered in bruises and it's 4 or 5 days later and you're still all covered in bruises, that's negligent and abusive behavior by that therapist. Um, there is I see no need for any of those tools. A lot of times people are, therapists are recommending and trying to market those tools, one as an upcharge financially, and two because they do not physically want to do the work of skin to skin massage for an hour. They want to take the easy route and just slap a bunch of cups on you. They want to take the easy route and scrape you with a tool. They don't want to get in there deep with their thumbs and do the work. Exogenous insulin in general for muscle growth, overrated or underrated? I think underrated. I think it gets a bad rap because a lot of people in competitive bodybuilding take it as a rite of passage that they're going to use insulin, one protocol or another. They're going to pull a protocol off Professional Muscle. They heard Milos on a YouTube video. They heard some of these other guys, Phil Viz, whoever else, talking about insulin, and they think, oh, I do a high carb meal after training, or I do 5 IU's of Humalog before training, and then I have an intra workout Gatorade. Like, improper use of insulin is why you hear so many people say they had bad experiences or it only made me fat or whatever. Thoughtful programming and usage of insulin and the different types of insulin, and not just like blanket daily use, like thoughtfully programmed to go along with how the diet then gets set up for those specific days. Underrated. Absolutely underrated. It can be excellent. It can be borderline game changing for certain physiques in terms of facilitating greater fullness and glycogen storage that otherwise that physique would not achieve. This person also, like a different person, asked about Lantus. I would say underrated, but commonly misused. IGF LR3. So I'm, for anyone that doesn't know, I'm going through a kit of this right now. It's tough to say. It's tough to say. And being that it is tough to say and that I don't have a definitive, yes, this is awesome for you, I'm going to say overrated based on the price. I mean, I ended up paying more for a kit of IGF LR3 than I pay for really high quality GH. So to me, like, I did that one time. I got one kit of it. When I'm done with it, I'll be done with it. And I don't see myself ever using it again. Arm day, underrated. Keeping E2 on the low end of normal on purpose all year. I think it's person dependent, but intentionally keeping your E2 low, like all throughout the off season, and when you want to be feeling good and capable and strong in the gym and growing new muscle tissue, I would say in that scenario it is overrated. I think the final 7 to 10 days prior to a contest, or maybe even less, even if you want to do less time on it, the final 5 days before a contest, like if you're competing on a Saturday and you start an AI protocol on a Monday, let's say, I think that's underrated, because that's how you bring out a crazy look, especially for somebody that's already ready conditioning wise. And I also think I've seen this before where guys go through a prep without any AI and they end up not pulling all the body fat off that they needed to, or that they should have or could have, if E2 was managed and on the lower end during prep. Lower E2 to me during prep, as long as it's not so buried that you can't get off the couch, is part of the process to pulling all the fat off during prep. All right, last one here, guys. Okay, bulking or pushing body weight up in the off season to grow when compared to main gaining. Okay, so I guess this is like, because again, like, I guess bulking is vaulted in the science community, and people say you can eat in a maintenance calorie amount and put on as much muscle as you need to. So for me, I would say that bulking, and I don't love that term, by the way. I think it gives people the wrong idea, but pushing body weight up and pushing a big calorie surplus, especially as someone that's enhanced, I think is so totally underrated. It's necessary. Like to be bigger, you need to be bigger. Simple. Um, you know, you can't every off season go to the same high end body weight and expect then to diet back down for stage and be bigger than last year. Like if you got to 230 this off season and then for your show you dieted to 190, you are going to need to be beyond 230 next year in the off season if you expect to be 200 pounds on stage next year. It's just fact. That is 100% fact. I will argue with anyone until I'm blue in the face. And the funny thing is about this particular topic is that it is only ever small guys that want to argue that you can get big on maintenance calories. It's like, well, how would you know? You're not big. You're not big and you haven't gotten any bigger either relative to your own size. You're always the same size, which is small. You're always small. So what are we arguing about? The guys that are big and get bigger every year do so by pushing their body weight up beyond where it was previously in the off season. And the idea is you want it to look as good as it can, but it's not going to look great. Like in my own example, last summer, I competed at 209 in August. This off season, I got up to 278. Did it look great? No, I didn't feel great about how I looked. I wasn't comfortable with the amount of food. I wasn't comfortable with how my stomach felt like it was always out. My face is all puffy, whatever. Really, the only time you feel good when you're heavy and putting on new muscle tissue is that 90 minutes in the gym. That's the only time that you feel good. But I did that work and I sacrificed how I wanted to feel or wanted to look in the here and now for the greater good down the line. And then I come back and I'm 224 on stage this past year. So that's 15 pounds of new muscle tissue in a year. And I did it by getting way heavier than I'd ever been. And I'm going to do it again this year. And people have been doing it in bodybuilding for the last 50 years and will continue to do so. Unless the TikTok trend just becomes gospel, I guess. And then at that point, that will just be the end of seeing really big bodybuilders on stage. You'll just see guys stay small. So hopefully that's not the case. That's not going to be the case with me or the athletes that I help. So we'll keep pushing our body weight up and coming in bigger every time. And that's where I'm going to end it. Thanks for everybody that's followed along. Keep your eyes peeled. The next episode or the next video that I drop will be the next episode of the rebound video. Talk about couple more cycle adjustments, food adjustment, big adjustment with mentality and training as well. So there's going to be a lot that gets covered there. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you guys think about the video. Let me know if I missed anything or you want me to discuss anything on the next underrated, overrated. And just appreciate everybody that sends messages, leaves comments, likes the video. Big time appreciate anyone that takes the time to watch the whole thing, share it up on your social media. All that stuff is not missed. It is greatly appreciated. So, yeah, thank you to everybody. And until next time, guys, I'm out.